Hi YouTube, I just wanted to do a video response to Zacko 263 or 236's top 5 bands video that he made. Zacko has been a very decent subscriber. He's been very responsive to our videos, and he gave us a shout out when he did his response to my top 5 films of all time. And then right after that he made his top 5 bands of all time and said if anybody wants to respond, feel free. And I was a little hesitant to do this video only because our channel is a film channel. We generally talk about movies, and I like to stay consistent with my theme. But I felt it was only fair since he did a response to my video, and I actually am a huge music fan, and in a way, I kind of like to say that music was my first love. I guess this kind of happens when you get older. You just kind of listen to what you grew up with, and every once in a while a new band might trickle in there. But Zach, doing his top 5 bands did make me kind of go back and think about it, and like, well, if I really had to think about it over all the years in which I was listening to music, what would be my top 5? Down below I will include links to videos that I think best represent the strengths of each band. So all of these bands are a notch more popular or well-known than the bands that Zach listed off in his. His were all pretty much consistently British post-punk or late punk kind of stuff, and then with the addition of the Pixies, the American band. But I love all of those bands. His list was great. Okay, so my top 5 band starts with this band, number 5, and this is 9 Inch Nails. One of the criteria I have for all the bands that are on my list is that they've been able to stick with me for a lengthy period of time, because as my life has gone by, there have been certain bands, certain musicians that I was really, really into for like a year or a year and a half or 2 years, and then as I got into other things or whatever, my interest in those bands kind of waned or just disappeared altogether. But 9 Inch Nails is a band that I got really, really into when I was about 16, 17 years old, when I was really angsty and really angry and really confused and frustrated, as most teenagers are. And this band just kind of said everything I wanted to hear. There was, along with a few other bands that were kind of in the same area of early 90s alternative rock, angsty sort of stuff, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, whatever. But 9 Inch Nails has been the only band of those that I could kind of appreciate on a different level later on. As I got older, my tastes kind of varied, and I was less angry, and the music I was listening to was less heavy and less aggressive. But I would go back every once in a while and pop in a 9 Inch Nails album, specifically the Downward Spiral, which I do think is one of the greatest albums ever written. And I can appreciate it on a completely musical level. I can just listen to this and say, this is really interesting songwriting, and really experimental and different, and it kind of captures its time that it came out, but it also still sounds really fresh and new. And I think if Downward Spiral was released today, it would still be just as important as it was when it was released back in '94. Maybe that's kind of a naive viewpoint, but there you go. My number 4 pick would be the White Stripes. I think they've stood the test of time so far, and it seems like they're not going away by any means, and it seems like their relevance is not waning or getting less interesting as they go. They're like one of those great bands, like I guess the Ramones, or the Ramones, I don't know. There's a few others, I'm sure, who, as time goes by, they don't have to change. Tom Waits, there's another one. Who, as time goes by, they don't have to change. Their music, they're doing what they want to do, and they could have released Icky Thump first, or they could have released White Blood Cells first, or whatever. The music that they're making is completely not conscious of the culture that's going on at the same time. They're not trying to stay ahead of the trends. They're just making the music they want to make. They have kind of I guess a throwback sort of sound to garage rock from the late 60s, early 70s, as well as Mississippi blues and Detroit punk rock and whatever. But they find a way to kind of mesh all of these things together in just this very consistent style that goes along with whatever they want to do. And every album by them is enjoyable and great on a different level, but consistent. And that's what I appreciate about them. And I think as time goes by, we're going to look back on the White Stripes as a band and say they were really one of the ones that stood out in the 2000s. So, my number 3 favorite band of all time is, and this is going to be kind of cliche, I guess, for a college-age person, but what's to say, they're just amazing. Radiohead. All of their albums, again, are really, really good and interesting and different, and they're always pushing new ground, and they seem to stay ahead of trends. And specifically, I think from the Bends, OK Computer, and Kid A are like the trifecta of just perfect college rock. Like, it just doesn't get better than those 3 albums. I think they're all 3 amazing and equally, just in completely different ways. Performance-wise, live, they're really, really good, and they just have this air about them that's like, you know, they're experimental, they're different, but they're not relegated to just being an indie act. And they're not, you know, a big stadium rock band either. They kind of exist in this whole other sort of air, almost like something like U2 before them, or REM before them, that they kind of exist in their own sort of popularity. And those are the bands I really kind of think are special, are the ones like the White Stripes and Radiohead, and even Nine Inch Nails to a certain extent, who they exist outside of their genre. They have their own kind of fame that is very specific to them. My number 2 favorite band of all time. And I would almost say that this is probably the number 1 greatest band of all time, objectively, outside of my opinion, outside of other people's opinions, critics, or whatever. Objectively, I think this is probably the greatest band of all time, is Led Zeppelin. If you listen to their music, you know, they're obviously, you know, a classic rock band, blues, British, late 60s era band. And there were a lot of bands at that time that sort of were in the same sort of ballpark, the Yardbirds and Cream and whatever. But Led Zeppelin, I think, literally was just the best that classic rock could get. Like, after Led Zeppelin, you listen to bands after Led Zeppelin that were following the classic rock formula. It was just, there was nowhere to go from Led Zeppelin but down. I mean, you'd still be pretty good or whatever, like Black Sabbath or Deep Purple or whatever, but they were not as good as Led Zeppelin. And before Led Zeppelin, bands weren't quite as good yet. I think they just took everything that was appealing about that 60s rock and roll blues sound and just brought everything up as high as it could go. The best singer, the best guitarist, the best drummer, the best songs, best albums. You know, they were kind of mysterious and dark in a weird way, but not in a pretentious, hype-driven sort of way. It was just kind of this persona that they built. I'm not saying that rock and roll was never as good as Led Zeppelin again. I'm just saying, as far as that classic rock formula, it couldn't get better. And then it degraded down to that Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Jefferson Starship crap, and that's when punk rock had to happen. to kind of bring it back to that kind of energy again, but with a new formula. And my number one favorite band of all time. Now, I already said objectively, Led Zeppelin's probably the greatest band of all time, but my number one favorite band, this is just me, my personal opinion, the band that I have listened to consistently the most since I started listening to them. It really was kind of a game changer, along with Radiohead and the White Stripes. Were kind of a game changer in my life. They kind of came in and said, this is also how music can sound. It showed me different conventions and took me into different directions. And I know a lot of people my age, I'm 25, a lot of people my age who discovered this band at the same time had that same sort of epiphany that this is, it's almost like the Pixies were for some people who are older than me, or how the Ramones were for people who are older than them. Whatever. I'll just say the band. The band is Modest Mouse. There are the people who got into them and continued to listen to their music and listen to the rest of their albums, and they have a certain kind of love for this band that doesn't exist with a lot of other bands. I mean, it certainly does. There's fandom everywhere, but their fans, and I think it's because of the personality of Isaac Brock as a songwriter and as a lyricist, that he really has this vulnerability to his lyrics, and his personality is very idiosyncratic, and his lyrics are very idiosyncratic, and you feel like you understand the band on this completely personal level that you don't usually listen to bands in. You feel like there's no barrier between you and the music when you're listening to it. You feel like it's just like going directly to you, and speaking to you personally. And I don't know, maybe not everybody feels that way when they listen to them, but that's how I feel. And there's that kind of personal connection that I just have to have after a while. Now, Modest Mouse is not the most original band in the world. If you listen to their music, you can obviously point out their antecedents in the Pixies and Pavement and other indie rock bands from the late 80s or late 90s, Built to Spill. But none of them quite have that same kind of passion that is in this band. And other bands since then has tried to sort of emulate that, like Bright Eyes and a few other bands, Death Cab for Cutie, but they don't quite get it in the same way. It just doesn't. Nothing against those bands, I like them too, but they don't quite have the same sort of energy and the same sort of magic that you get from Isaac Brock as a songwriter. So that's the best I can do, I guess, at trying to explain why I really like them. So there's my top 5 favorite bands, and if anybody wants to do a video response to this, you are welcome, or you can continue the responses to Zacko 236's video that I'm responding to. And I definitely recommend his channel and his videos. He's a really good vlogger, really good reviewer. Like a lot of the people on YouTube, he's surprisingly young for as much as he knows, but he does know a lot, and he's great to listen to and hilariously British. So there you go. I'll see you guys later, and respond if you want to. Bye.